Hey guys, how's it going?
It's doing great.
Hey, Darren.
Hi. Um, See that some people are joining. Maybe let's wait a while for people to join, I guess. Hi. Is it Will?
Welcome.
Yeah, I think it is. The through nothing person. I think like we set it so that only we can unmute people. So just keep that in mind.
Where do they type questions? Just in the general chat?
Yeah, I think that works. Yeah, so yeah, basically if anybody has any questions, just feel free to ask them in the general chat and we'll, we'll be happy to answer them. You could also just wait until the end and we'll unmute you and you guys can talk. Yeah.
So how's everyone doing? Post it in the general chat.
Yeah.
Let us know what country you're visiting from.
Nice.
Yeah, so Darren, do you think it might be a good idea just to let people talk in the community call, or should we keep everyone muted? Since, I mean, it might be better than to just have people randomly type stuff in the general, since it's kind of like off to the side and everything. Shane, I think you're muted.
If we don't have too many people, I don't think it
Yeah,
would be terrible.
well, let me just unmute everyone. Let's see. How do you unmute people? Yeah, I unmuted.
What would be cool too is like the Skype feature where you like raise your hand, like you just press a button and it raises a hand. And then you
Yeah,
just unmute
although I'm
that
not
person.
sure
Yeah.
whether Discord has such a feature.
Yeah, we can just do
I think
the
only
audio
in-
system. You know,
in the
even if
stages
you're not
thing.
talking.
Yeah, in the stages it allows you to do the hand raising. But
Yeah, I feel like maybe like in the future we can just do our calls on Jitsi and set that up to have all these things. That's really easy. So okay, so
Yeah,
I,
that works.
I gave everybody permissions to unmute themselves. So you know, if anybody wants to speak up, they can just talk. So
Sweet. Hey guys, what's up?
Howdy do.
Hey.
how
Hey,
you
Yeah.
doing?
what's up, man?
Hi.
looks like Darren is
Inside
having
Breeze.
trouble joining. Like his video keeps
Yeah, I
loading.
think like Darren's video is just like spinning and not loading. I guess that's fine.
Hey, Inside Breeze, you can unmute yourself
Yeah.
if you'd like.
And
We're kind of doing the honor system. If you're not talking, just
yeah.
mute.
Also, like I actually in Discord you can set people's priority when talking. So actually, when we talk, their volume would go down. So even if they want to disrupt
Oh,
us,
cool.
it's actually really hard. Discord's kind of designed for these huge calls. It has lots of cool features for that. Hi, Magnum Thunderstick.
This isn't going to
What
be
a name.
ridiculous at all. Like,
Yeah.
welcome,
No.
Captain Thunder.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hey.
Can't really change my name. It is what it is. I like it.
Yeah, no need.
Hi.
What up, is
Oh,
Cloud?
that's cool.
So should we begin? Or?
Yeah, I just chatted with Darren. He says he's having some connection issues. Something is up. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
worst case scenario, if he's struggling, I could try and shepherd the questions.
Yeah, let me see.
But
Just hold down the print
If
screen
Darren's
button,
having
we'll be good.
trouble, is Darren's audio recording working? I didn't end up getting mine set up.
Oh, it's fine. I'm recording the audio too, so it should be okay.
The full,
Great.
everyone?
Yeah, so I'm recording both myself and you guys, and I'll put it together later. So
Okay, great.
yeah, so that should be what I'm doing. Yeah. Oh, hi, Darren.
Hey.
Can I see
Hey
you
everybody, sorry, I don't know what happened there. My Discord just completely shut down. Apologies.
now? Okay.
No worries.
Yeah.
Things happen.
Okay, so shall we go through some introductions, or have I missed that part? I'm very sorry.
No,
about that.
I think we
Nope,
should
we've
start
been
with
waiting.
that. Yes.
Thank you very much. You're very polite. Okay, so thank you to everybody who tuned in to listen today. This is our first community call with Themelio, and really looking forward to getting into it and letting everybody meet the team here. We're a wonderful bunch of guys. So today I have Eric, Shane, Jay, Marco, and Mead. So yeah, maybe I'll let you all introduce yourselves, and we can get into it.
Okay, so
Eric first.
okay, yeah. So I'm Eric. I'm the founder of Familio, and I mostly just code all sorts of stuff for Themelio, and plan things out for the company and do founder things like that. So Themelio kind of was started as my own research project, and later I decided to commercialize it, and that's how Themelio came into being. So I'm kind of like the architect behind Themelio, so to speak.
I'll go. I'm Jay. I've been working here for almost a year now, and I'm just a general developer, working in Rust. I've worked on the virtual machine in Themelio, the compiler. Very interested in like cryptography and stuff like that, and general like blockchain concepts. So kind of just a general developer working around everything that we need.
Where are you guys all based?
I'm based in Texas is my home, but right now I'm actually in Mexico.
Yeah,
That one's a nomad.
yeah, I'm based in Chicago for the time being.
Yeah, I'm out of Idaho.
I'm in Texas as well.
Similar to Jay, I'm from Texas. Well, from all over in the West Coast and Texas, but right now I'm also in Mexico.
I'll go, I guess. I guess this is an order of hiring. No one hired Eric. But yeah, I'm Shane. I'm the front end developer, and I kind of just go in and do little things here and there to make things a little nicer and better. I worked on a little bit of the Rust code, but you know me from my public project, MailScan. And I also made the wallet, which we never announced, but you can use the Familio network right now. You can use our testnet. The wallet is live.
Yeah, but we're
Nice.
still kind of wrapping it up, but yeah,
Yeah.
it should go live quite soon.
We should make sure to share a link so people can check that out after this.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that would be a good point.
Yeah.
Still beta. But
Yeah, it's not exactly something we're planning on announcing today, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is there.
Like, go ahead and break it and yell at us and tell us what we did badly. But yeah, I'll go up next. Mead, the head of DevOps here, basically all that means is, as kind of mentioned, do everything and everything, and try and keep lights green. I think that's about as simple as I can keep it.
He does a lot of stuff.
I try.
Jack of all trades.
Sometimes I think that Mead outsources some of his work because the amount of stuff he gets done is just unreal.
I'm over here just basically think of me as like a good old F1 driver, where you're just like, what's happening? You're like, I don't know, I'm jamming the gears until they fit. Like, look, it'll get back gear in a moment, fine.
It'll eventually work.
That's basically what I'm doing while we're on this call. I'm over here staring at stuff. I have no idea what's going on. I'm like, I will figure out how to make CI for a language that I have no idea what it is. Fantastic. Oh no, I'm making you toys. You should be happy. This is that Solidity stuff I was telling you about.
Yeah, it's nice.
All right, and I guess my name is Marco. I just joined very recently. I'm super excited to hit the ground running. Joined as a Solidity developer. Hoping to join forces with Jay and build the bridge to Ethereum. I'm a big fan of blockchain and DeFi in general, and I'm super glad to be part of the team.
Okay.
Awesome. And welcome.
Thanks, guys.
Cool. Okay, well, that's everybody, I suppose.
And Darren orchestrated this call.
Yes.
So we have Darren today.
Yes.
Yes.
See, there you go. That's the appropriate facial response.
No, it's cool. We'll get through it. So yeah, for anybody listening, any questions at all, feel free to post them in the general chat, or I believe we can permit anybody that wants to speak.
Whoever wants to speak can actually just unmute their own mic and speak. I changed the permissions for that.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
So yeah,
Nice one.
any questions?
And
Yeah. Feel free to interject at any time, because what you have to say is probably more important than what we have to say.
you
Or
can either
we
do
will
that or
respond.
text it in the general channel. So.
Yeah, whatever you feel more comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
if not, Darren has questions.
Sure do. But actually, I don't know if anybody here, or maybe everybody has seen it, who might be listening today, with the article that was published in NASDAQ just the other day. That was a nice bit of exposure. Pretty cool. Nice write-up you had there, Eric. Know if you wanted to go through anything on that, or
Not really.
is there anything?
I guess I actually quite wonder, like, where did everybody come from, all the people joining? I guess there's not that many, but there is a few. So
Yeah, now it's your turn to introduce yourselves.
I guess we can start. You know me already. This is Will, the chain producer in the project, and I'm excited what you guys are building. In Familio, I am currently based not far from some of you guys in New Orleans.
Nice.
thanks.
Well,
Also engineer
know
by
I
background.
You
So,
said you are where now?
in New Orleans.
Oh.
And I'm an engineer by background, so I like to geek out on some of this stuff as
I
well.
was born in Metairie, fellow Yat. Hi.
Okay, nice. I'm actually in Metairie, actually. So yeah.
Nice. There you go.
Yep.
And
Thank
what
for
got you
joining.
excited in Themelio? Just curious.
Well, a lot of things. I definitely think the stablecoin is super interesting, but additionally, I really like Eric's philosophy on anti-governance in general, and like the sort of like classification or unchangeability, immutability of the base layer, as well as, I mean, the philosophy around the language there and the VM there, and some of the benefits of it being a UTXO chain. I think it's just very interesting and put together in a very interesting way.
Yeah, it's always curious to know when it's like, oh, it's decentralized, kind of. And this is a different animal for sure.
Yep, agreed.
Definitely sounds like you're an engineer.
No, but I think the Mel is just super interesting in that it's like I think kind of one of the first sort of like native store of like stable store of value that's not necessarily pegged to the dollar and doesn't rely on any sort of external data sources. I think that's going to be super interesting.
Well, hopefully it is. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, not to just like go off on tangents here, but this is definitely an interesting thing. Eric has talked about this a lot, how there's kind of like two major like value propositions with having this stable currency that's non-fiat. Like one, which is I think kind of the reason that Eric, you made this, and you can speak to this some, is like its utility for security, because ultimately what we're trying to build is something that is like a root of trust, and you need security for that. But also somewhat separately, it's also just really useful as a currency that people can use. They don't have to use it as the root of trust.
Yeah. And to expand on the first point a little bit more, it's really the idea that, let's say you're designing an ENS naming system, and you need to hold like naming auctions and price things and that kind of thing. Or basically, whenever you design like a game theory mechanism or whatever, and you want to price the incentives, you do want a currency that's stable. Otherwise, it's like, what if the currency 10x is like this nagging thing that might mess up all your calculations? So.
I love how you describe that as a thing, like a nagging thing that messes up calculations. That's
because like it might not mess up your, like if you lend people money, for example, and then the unit of account just suddenly changes 10x, then
I think that was actually a big part of the problem that early prediction markets was that things were priced in ETH, and that's why they all sort of moved. Like it's hard to, you're sort of inherently predicting the price of ETH as well as the outcome of the thing you're like betting. So they've all basically moved to stable coins for that reason.
And then everybody has to rely on like the security of oracles now because of stable coins. So and even then you're still betting on how much the dollar is worth in that future. So
That would be the first time that I heard of 10xing as a bad thing.
I mean, cryptoeconomics, like it's an assumption in most of the cryptoeconomic systems that the value is, something that can be relied on.
Yeah, it at least means something, right? Like if you get 10 Bitcoins, it should be 10 times better than getting one. But, not if doing so also changes the price of Bitcoins. And that really messes up lots of things. So.
That's very true, actually. Very true. Okay, well, let's have a quick look and see if we have any questions in the general chat. Otherwise, I might have a question for you guys.
Yeah, I don't think there is any questions.
Okay, so if you had to try and decide what was the main problem that Themelio is tackling, what would that be? I know we might have touched on that a little bit already, but I feel...
So I think the main problem that Familio really tries to tackle is that it's basically this. Before we had blockchains, we didn't really have any kind of decentralized root of trust, like any kind of endogenous root of trust where you have a protocol or a system that's just trustworthy by its construction, like that we know it's secure simply because of how it is. For example, right, like back before blockchains, if you wanted to transact money in a trustworthy manner, ultimately you're trusting some central bank or a payment system. And you can't decide that that's trustworthy just by looking at it. It has to be some kind of external trust. Now, blockchains were supposed to fix that. Like when you use Bitcoin, you're not supposed to be trusting some Bitcoin company to not be bad, right? But the problem is really like because of a variety of reasons, blockchains actually don't have this kind of strong endogenous trust that they were designed for. And I think that's mostly because they're tightly coupled to applications. Like Bitcoin, for example, is a money transmitting app, and Ethereum is just like a VM for apps. So in short, basically what Familio tries to do is really return to the roots of blockchains, actually fix the problem of trust, and be what blockchains have always been meant to be. And it does so by decoupling from applications and being really stable and immutable.
Awesome. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add to that? That was
I saw somebody ask the question in general.
We have something from Bearable.
Okay, well, thank you, Bearable. We'll jump to that. So, in 10 to 15 years, how many blockchains do you believe there will be? This is like a three-part question, so maybe we'll break it down.
More than a few.
Well, I guess I can try answering that. So in 10 to 15 years, I think like there will still be tons of blockchains because first of all, it depends on the definition of a blockchain. So is, let's say, a side chain whose root of trust is Ethereum or Themelio a blockchain? It kind of is, and it kind of isn't. If you count that as, I would expect there to be hundreds or even thousands of public blockchains out there because it is a useful data structure for all sorts of things. I mean, if you squint hard enough, Git repository is also a blockchain. So, but if you mean like kind of root of trust, independent blockchains, like public blockchains, I actually don't think there will be a lot of mainstream blockchains that are secure. I would expect the number to be more like 5 to 10 or something like that at most. And that's really just because I think there are several main blockchain paradigms. You have the traditional single purpose blockchain like Bitcoin. And in that world, Bitcoin is obviously dominant simply because it's the oldest and there's not much you can innovate in that field. And then you have like the VM blockchain that's basically exemplified by Ethereum that tries to basically be this universal environment where you can run any kind of application, stateful application on and smart contracts on. And I don't see any reason why Ethereum wouldn't be dominant in that because most of the research is still done in that and they're going to add sharding and things like that. Ethereum in 10 years might be a very different blockchain than it is now. It might be some weird sharded quasi-blockchain construct, but it most likely would dominate that space. And I think Familio would most likely, what Familio would be a completely different paradigm, basically. Something that goes beyond the traditional dichotomy of a platform and an application, but rather as an ordered data system for endogenous trust. And I would imagine Familio's ecosystem to be larger and smaller than the other two, depending on how you see it. I would imagine that applications that actually really just need a root of trust and don't need to run completely in a blockchain are much more suited for Themelio because it provides a much stronger root of trust guarantee and it's designed for that use case. While, you know, certain applications might still want to use things like Ethereum, although in my opinion, those applications can use a side chain that's, you know, tied to Themelio and that would be more secure. But I do think that you'll see like a consolidation of blockchains around these major paradigms.
All right, I have a follow-up question to this, which is basically that it seems mostly in the space today that this sentiment that like blockchain is the root, the value, the core value proposition of a blockchain is like the trust, is not like a widely agreed upon sentiment. So most new projects are still building new consensus algorithms or redoing the like blockchain for their own application, and they're not pegging to another chain for root of trust. And what do you think would be like some of the maybe security vulnerabilities that we would see that would maybe cause consolidation?
Yeah, I think what would cause consolidation, yes, in one case it would be security vulnerabilities, and I can start with that. But mostly I think it's like more positive things. But you know, some vulnerabilities we can see is, for example, let's say if a major blockchain-based application on one of these smaller chains has security that's completely subverted for some widely agreed to be bad purpose. Let me just give you a hypothetical example. Let's say somebody starts a Filecoin-like blockchain for making a YouTube-like peer-to-peer video sharing website. And some like rich guy or, you know, some ASIC farm takes over the consensus and does, you know, let's say naked like political things like censor politically incorrect opinions on it or something that usually you expect companies like YouTube to do. I think that would make people really lose trust in this kind of let's make a video blockchain. Although like in that case, I think that another problem is that I think it'll also cause a problem where people just think that blockchains are just bad in general. I think, but I think that's actually going to happen. Like I think I do expect the kind of like mask over how secure DeFi and certain decentralized protocols is to come off once like serious actors want to attack them and take them over. And I think that would push both kind of a decrease in interest in blockchains in general, which is not very good, but also push people in this space to think more clearly about how to actually make these decentralized blockchains actually secure. So yeah, I think that kind of thing where, you know, through subversion of their security, you have these decentralized protocols behaving exactly like centralized protocols. That's really going to shock the market, so to speak. And on the more positive side, I do think that kind of like if Familio's vision of the blockchain being like this rather removed root of trust makes adoption much easier. Like tomorrow, you know, or like figuratively, Signal or Telegram or some other messaging application, for example, could just decide, let's use Familio as a root of trust for public key authentication. And they don't need to change the rest of the infrastructure. It's still like a traditional centralized app, but now the end-to-end security is like so much more secure because it doesn't depend on key distribution by a centralized party. And it's completely seamless and user-friendly. And in that case, I think that can really like make people see the value of a new paradigm, basically applications that are much more mainstream and don't feel kind of like crypto D-app, like snazzy NFT, and that it's not associated with that world. I think that would really be good for blockchains.
Yeah, exactly. Like Signal doesn't have to become a blockchain company in order to utilize it. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Awesome.
So I see that like somebody had, perhaps I should answer the question in general.
Yeah. Think about proof of stake versus proof of work.
Yeah.
And why did you decide proof of stake?
Yes, so that was the question on general. So I think for proof of stake versus proof of work, I'm of the opinion that proof of stake is just better. Now, the reason is because so Vitalik actually from Ethereum has a pretty strong argument for that. But by the way, is my mic doing okay? Since I saw somebody texting me that my mic is cutting out.
I hear you. Okay.
Okay.
It was just one time that I think it was your internet.
I see. That makes sense. Yeah.
Generally, it sounds good.
Okay. So basically, I would say that proof of stake is simply better. Vitalik gives some pretty good reasons in his argument for why Ethereum should switch to proof of stake, but it really boils down to with proof of stake, you're like directly, you can kind of make the difficulty of attacking the blockchain proportional to how valuable the blockchain is. And that's because to control the blockchain, you literally buy shares in kind of the economic value in the blockchain to control a fraction of it. So the more important your blockchain actually is to its consumers, so to speak, the harder it is to take it over. And therefore, you know, the more people rely on the blockchain, naturally, the harder it is to subvert. With proof of work, that's not the case at all, because with proof of work, you have these miners that have ASICs and other devices that do consensus, and their interests are not really aligned with the actual economic users of the blockchain, because the value that they derive isn't directly from a fraction of the value, economic value that the blockchain contributes to society. So you actually have this like inherent incentive alignment problem of the miners versus the users. And in Bitcoin's history, we actually see this a lot. Like a lot of the fights over, you know, governance and protocol things are like miners versus users. And this becomes really perverse because you're relying on the miners for security. So this is the first argument, kind of the incentive alignment problem I think that proof of work inherently has. And the second one is kind of just more technical, which is that with proof of work, you can't really have finality of consensus, and everything is kind of like probabilistic and eventually consistent. And I think this is a huge problem that people don't acknowledge enough in blockchains, which is that in a proof of work blockchain that's based on, you know, longest chain Nakamoto consensus, basically Bitcoin and Ethereum, What is actually on the blockchain is completely subjective. It depends on what you've seen on your network connection. And therefore, when you use the blockchain, the security ultimately comes from the security of low latency network connection, as in you can see other peers and talk to them in a timely fashion. And that's really problematic because we want to build constructs on blockchains like public key infrastructures that are safe against adversarial networks. And bad networks that want to harm us are everywhere. You have everything ranging from your local insecure coffee shop internet to China. And I think like only proof of stake with Byzantine fault-tolerant consensus can really be secure against any attacks on its safety by damaging liveness. And I think that's basically why I think proof of stake is just categorically more secure and just more economically properly incentivized than proof of work.
I think that's some great points. I think one of the reasons we don't hear so much about that is like that's some very high level stuff that the average crypto user is not going to really be able to go into that much detail and understand in that level.
Yeah, and I think like that's,
concepts.
and I think like ultimately
Very
like I think this reflects something really interesting, which is that I think this is simply because, as I said, blockchains are not designed properly. When people are interested in blockchains, they gotta personally go in and understand, proof of stake versus proof of work, all these weird technical details. But we don't force people to do that with other technology. We don't, when people like use Facebook or use some internet app, they don't need to know the trade-off between packet switching and circuit switching, or other low-level details of the internet. And I think it's simply because with blockchain, somehow the technology itself has become the focus of attention when it should really be used as a tool for building secure decentralized apps.
Yeah, and that's maybe something that will become abstracted more over time as like more trust develops for the blockchain technologies. Because, I mean, again, the technology is about trust, and it's hard to trust it if you don't understand it since it's still so early.
Definitely.
And with that, I think, because like my experience, professionally is really not so much being in this arena. And in the tech world, it's this giant buzzword that people pretend like they know what they're talking about. And you're like, you're using blockchain. And you're like, great. What is that? They like have no idea. And it's still, in a lot of ways, being defined. I mean, look at what we're doing here, like Eric's idea and all this wonderful stuff, and it's a completely different implementation than Bitcoin and this, that, and the other. And you go, well, like, what's a blockchain? You're like, it's kind of a fluid definition. So having something that is kind of like trying to grab fog at the moment is not going to necessarily be clearly defined. And that's okay as long as that is upfront and honest, and it's not like this is the thing. It's like we're kind of greenfielding it,
Yeah, and I think I think it's important for people to realize that these are like rather complicated, underexplored things. I think it's really easy to just attach a bunch of like oversimplified narratives to proof of work versus proof of stake. Like, you hear people saying, proof of stake is just, people with the most money control everything. Or, proof of work is not eco-friendly. And you have all these like meme-like narratives going around that don't actually tell you anything about the technology and don't help you understand it. And I think that's a big problem in the community.
Yeah, it's also interesting that proof of stake hasn't really been like tested at a massive scale yet. Like there are networks that have really big market caps like Polkadot and Cardano that are proof of stake, but they don't really have like smart contracts yet and things like this.
Yeah, and I think the bigger networks that use proof of stake typically do so in a quasi-centralized delegated proof of stake fashion. I would like, at least I know like Cardano is kind of like that. And
Polkadot is not delegated proof of stake. Yeah. It's better than that.
I see. So it's not, somehow I got the impression that their validator set was decided by governance, but evidently.
No, I think it's more just like they've baked governance into the process. Like
that makes sense. Yeah.
Validators have some weight, and then there's also, they have like a technical committee, and they get some weight, and they're like voted on, and they have like terms, like longer terms or something like that. Yeah.
I have kind of a follow-up question for the one you just answered, Eric.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering why it seems like nobody in the blockchain space is focusing on. Well, it seems everyone is focusing on the app part of the protocol.
Yeah.
And I understand, Bitcoin. He probably started with the killer app first, right?
Yeah.
He wanted a peer-to-peer digital currency,
Yeah.
and so then he went backwards from that to blockchain.
Yeah.
But after that, why is nobody focusing on having these, like, why is everything getting crammed into the application layer and not, all the foundational layers like we've
Yeah.
seen in mature technologies?
Yeah, and I think it's because I think it's really because of a particular mentality, I would say, in the crypto world, which is really like your kind of move fast and break things, I don't know, tech startup mentality. And in most cases, that is good. Like in most software development, that really does push you to kind of innovate new applications more quickly. But I think it is like kind of antithetical to making an actual blockchain that does what blockchains are supposed to do, which is not be the coolest, snazziest new blockchain with the most features, but be the most stable and conservative blockchain that doesn't need to change. And I think that's a big problem. And I think it really is just people are so caught up in making new and cool apps that they don't have time to think about.
I would kind of second on top of that insofar as to say a lot of people don't think like carpenters of like measure twice, cut once, and it's like, oh, just like build a house with it. You're like, well, it fell down like 7 times. You're like, well, maybe you could have thought.
I think I think it's also just what's available, right? I think like if you look at, for example, how telecom developed before the internet, it was kind of like how crypto is now. Like people think of these cool futuristic things like, oh, in the future people will have video chats, and then they think of like making these weird contraptions that the only thing that the whole infrastructure can do is video chats, and it doesn't catch on, obviously. Like people made lots of things like that because they didn't kind of find the right common abstraction for all communication that we now have with the packet switch internet. So I think the whole point of Themelio is to have this really boring basis that is like packet switch internet that can actually act as the environment in which this kind of free innovation is even possible. And you should move fast and break things, making stuff on Familio. That's kind of the whole point.
Yeah. And I think that there's another reason too, which is basically that, like, if you think about it, there's basically 2 ways to accomplish like a decentralized trustless app today. One is that you can write like an Ethereum smart contract that runs in the EVM on top of a blockchain that is decentralized and trustless. And the second is that you can use like cryptography, and you can trust that the cryptography is valid. But the thing is that most people don't really know how to.
I think like I would say that's somewhat of a fallacy, because I think the things these two do are kind of different, because the whole thing about blockchains is that it's based not really on cryptography but on crypto economics. And
that's true. But
and there are certain things you can do with blockchains that you simply can't with cryptography. For example,
I'm not saying that.
Yeah. For example, I think like let's say you're writing like a chat app or something. I think like the hard part is really like the public key infrastructure. How you can bind a name to a public key in a globally consistent fashion. And by the time you solve this problem, you've made your own blockchain. But I do agree that like what you said is true in certain aspects. Like people often feel like if I write everything in Solidity and just have Ethereum run it for me, it's magically secure.
I mean, a good example would just be like a ZK rollup or something like that. Like a ZK rollup doesn't necessarily need to be its own blockchain. And in fact, you can get all the guarantees about all of the computation that happens in the virtual machine of a ZK rollup using cryptography.
Yeah.
And then you can just post that.
You do need a blockchain to point to that.
Yes, you need a blockchain to point to. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of my point. Is like, you don't have to write it in an EVM contract if you know how to do these like complex kind of cryptography things, which is a lot of what we're moving to. We're moving to using the blockchain just as like a commitment like the trust aspects, and then
Yeah.
running all the computation off chain.
Which is good, right? And that's the kind of paradigm Familio would encourage too. Except, if that's what you're doing, what's all the other craft that's there for writing like all these complicated stateful applications on chain? Which is why I think Ethereum is kind of like still kind of stuck in that mindset, if only for legacy reasons.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying basically, is like when the EVM started, the idea was let's create a Turing machine, like let's create an entire computer that will be encapsulated in this trusted model, so that anybody can write any kind of program, and that program will be trusted. And everybody thought that they could just write their programs like they normally do in JavaScript, and then they would be trusted because they're running on the EVM on Ethereum. But what we're realizing is it doesn't really scale, and you actually need to use like cryptography tricks and just use the blockchain as the commitment for trust, basically. Yeah. Which requires kind of like a shift in the developer mindset.
And a different kind of blockchain, essentially. And
from what Familio is doing, like they're trying to now just use that as a trust substrate instead of, just doing everything like they intended. And, it might have been easier to have started with that in mind, like, oh, this is not going to scale. How would we do this differently, starting from zero?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me see, in general, I see somebody asked, could Familio ever be mobile native? I'm not sure exactly what you mean by mobile native. Could you explain a bit?
Do you mean being able to run the wallet on mobile? Like what are we getting at?
Or maybe like a node.
That's how I would interpret it.
Like running full node? Yeah, we could shoehorn it into some things.
There's a challenge now.
But I would say that if by mobile native you mean like, projects like IOTA that try to have like small devices be able to run full nodes, I actually don't think Familio is going to be like that, because I don't really see that as important to blockchain security. And that's really because like I don't think the core of blockchains is just maximizing decentralization in the sense of let's have as many devices run full nodes as possible. The purpose of decentralization is simply to enforce endogenous trust. And all you need is really enough people so that they're not all bad and they're not all like irrational in the same way. So I think there is a undue focus on kind of like running on small devices and decentralization in the blockchain world. Because people don't understand that decentralization isn't the end, isn't the purpose of blockchains. It's a means by which we get, endogenous trust that's not dependent on trusting anybody in particular.
I think an element of, well, I don't know, but from a consumer point of view, from, people who are looking at different blockchains and cryptocurrencies and things to invest in, and in terms of mining, I think the idea of being able to mine or to stake or earn via your mobile is a very attractive idea. And I think that's probably where, from one side, I think that idea might come out of that, people's desire to be able to utilize their various different devices. Whereas I noticed the way you looked at it, Eric, was kind of, from a decentralization point of view, and that's not the highest goal in terms of having the blockchain run on every single device. So,
certainly, like people will be able to run like thin clients on their phones and participate in things like minting MALs or staking SIMs and being able to securely use the blockchain, but it wouldn't be the same as running a full node.
Yeah. That actually leads me to a question that I think is a good fit now. So, how do you foresee people and different companies, groups, organizations, whatever, using Themelio maybe 5 to 10 years down the line? We kind of talked about Ethereum maybe being some kind of quasi-sharded blockchain in the future. That's kind of hard to imagine right now. But how might you imagine Themelio being down the line?
Yeah, so I would imagine Themelio to be pervasively embedded as roots of trust in all sorts of applications that don't look like crypto applications. For example, you might go to a website and on top it's HTTPS, right? And then that TLS certificate is actually deposited in some Familio-backed, perhaps even layer 2 roll-up system where you know that everybody else also sees this certificate. And that's just completely seamless and handled by the browser, which embeds like a tiny little Themelio client in it. You could also imagine things like, for example, you're playing a game and the in-game currency might be backed by some token on some roll-up of on top of Familio, but you're not playing a blockchain game. You are not a crypto enthusiast. You're just using something that you take for granted that uses Themelio as an underlying technology. And I think that kind of, at least I hope, that kind of application would be what dominates kind of the downstream of Familio. And this also, an interesting thing is that this also means we wouldn't really see such a huge and exciting Familio community per se, because those people might not share so much in common other than they use this technology. It is similar to how we don't really see, there's not really such a thing as, let's say, I don't know, electricity user community, because it's just a small part of something of our daily life. It's a very important part, but that's not what we think about when we, turn on the stove or, turn on the light. And there would be, for example, oven enthusiast communities, but there would not be electricity enthusiast communities. And similarly, I don't really expect kind of Themelio itself to have this fan base that just talks about, where the SIM price is going all day and just plays around with Themelio, the base layer all day. Like it's too boring for that.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's a good analogy, actually, one I haven't heard before. Does anybody else have any, like, Jay, Mead, anybody? Any ideas about what you might like to see on Themelio as well down the line? Or echoing what Eric said?
I think we all have, I can speak from my point of view, I have a much different field of view or focus, if you want to say, of just like getting this whole world up and running and making things happy and getting it into everyone's hands. I think seeing anyone and everyone running a full node would be a really wonderful thing to where it's like, just use all the magic that we have and do the thing.
Yeah.
I think that would be something I would want to see.
Yeah, it's mostly just the resource usage, especially like the storage and bandwidth. I don't think it'll fit on most people's phones and, LTE plans. That's all.
Yeah, one thing, there's a lot of things that I'm excited about seeing, but one thing I'm really excited about is also just using the MEL as a non-fiat stable currency.
Yeah.
And, maybe seeing like people that totally don't know about blockchain using that, just like people today are using Bitcoin for remittances to different countries and stuff. Like, the MEL would actually be a stable currency and as something that they could use, and there's, a really low transaction fee with it. So especially if that's kind of like focused on by some part of the ecosystem, then
I would definitely imagine that, kind of a very low transaction fee layer 2 monetary settlement system, like, either based on payment channels or, ZK rollups or something. It would really it would be really important to the ecosystem. It'll make using MEL much cheaper than using most cryptocurrencies,
Absolutely.
of by default.
Yeah. And on that note,
it would be nice.
Go
ahead.
Let me just finish. Seeing like a privacy layer for MELs too, as a layer 2.
Yeah. So we could definitely have like a ZK rollup that also implements privacy features. So. Yeah, I see.
But yeah, it would be. I think a lot about people who have a hard time getting paid, like undocumented immigrants, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Our opinions might be here or there on that, but people who have a hard time getting paid on Familio would be a really interesting application.
Yeah, I think that also just applications like, for example, you simply don't want other people to know like who you're paying and things like that, right? And there's lots of applications for that. And
or maybe you don't want to invest in assets because you're worried about what the future of the economy looks like, but you also don't want to store in fiat because you're worried about what the future of inflation looks like.
Exactly.
You've been reading my journal.
Investing these days is very hard, definitely. So I see that in general, somebody asked.
Yeah, we had a good question. Roadmap, network, and how can people do things?
Yeah, definitely. So the network right now is technically we have already launched a mainnet and a testnet, and they're running side by side, like, the Bitcoin mainnet and testnet would and things like that. But because we haven't done a token sale yet, you guys don't really have any means to get your hands on the mainnet. You can, obviously run a full node and look at blocks being produced, but you can't actually obtain mainnet tokens yet. But participation in the testnet is completely open. Anybody can actually print money on the testnet using the faucet functionality. It's documented on the documentation website, and play around with all the functionality. And the covenant language and things like that, they're mostly complete too, although we're still putting the final touches on those things. And so if you want to get involved, I think right now, just running a node and also playing around with the tooling, like the wallet and the minting system and the covenant language, the Melodion covenant language, those would all be ways you can get involved. And in Q1 next year, we are planning on doing a proper token sale, and you guys should be able to eventually buy tokens and actually participate on the mainnet.
Yeah, and to answer from the more system side of things, as far as the status of the network and everything, as Eric said, we have quite a few hundred of nodes running around the world, and that's all just waiting for everyone to get their hands on.
Yes. So we've definitely, Bearable asked, when is the mainnet scheduled? As I said, the mainnet actually is already running. We just haven't sold the mainnet tokens to you guys yet. It is up and running. You can run it right now. It's just that you can't send transactions because you wouldn't have any money. But we are planning on selling the tokens early next year.
Yeah, in fact, if you go to the website, there's a Melscan tab. So you can see the testnet and the mainnet running.
Although I think the Melscan is actually down now for some reason.
Oh no.
Yeah. I think it has something to do with the changes I made to the state transition function, and I'll update it very quickly.
I was about to ask if that was my fault.
No, it's my fault.
How could I have done that?
The blame.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, we could just announce a few of the projects they are working on, and things that, because we say tooling, if you're interested in just messing with any aspect of this, some of the things that we're working on and have worked on in the past, it's the wallet, which right now is called Ginkgo. That name is subject to change. And that's something that you can download from GitHub right now if you want to. It's also packaged for some Linux distributions and maybe Windows, maybe Mac. It's questionable right now. But yeah, so we have a wallet where you can get some mels on the testnet, stuff like that. There's also, we've built, the entire higher level language for writing Covenant scripts. And that's pretty feature complete. So if you're interested in programming, you can actually go and try writing programs and compiling them, seeing how that works. You can even, if you're savvy enough, actually submit it to the test network. What else do we have? Another project that we're working on right now is actually the bridge contracts, which is going to allow us to trustlessly wrap mels on Ethereum as an ERC20 token. And hopefully we'll have that out in the next few months. So that's going to be a pretty big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can run your own node as well. And Jay, you said that it's questionable whether Mac and Windows builds of the wallet work, but they
do
work
work.
from my understanding.
It's just that I think it's a little involved building that, and we haven't automated.
Yeah,
it.
we should post links to them built on the GitHub.
Definitely.
Yeah. We could. So over the holidays, I'll work with you guys. We'll get all of that information into the Discord. We'll get an FAQ, and what would we call it? A channel of all these interesting links where people can basically can find all the different things that they can look into and mess around with and try to use now. So that's going to be done soon.
Cool.
Something that came to mind actually from something we were discussing a little bit earlier when we were talking about the different applications and different things that you guys would like to see on Themelio. One thing I wanted to ask about, and it might be a good reference point for people who've just arrived here as well, and for people who are going to listen back and watch the video. So with the 2-token system, with Mel and Sim, why do we need both for Themelio to work?
Yeah, so I think the reason, there is like a more obvious reason, there's a more technical reason. The more obvious reason is simply money is not a good a token that's good for money is not going to be a token that's good for proof of stake. And that's simply because when you have a token that's designed for proof of stake, you want its value to go up and down based on the value of the network. And you want the supply to be fixed. You want kind of it to give you dividends, essentially. And basically you want something that behaves economically kind of like a stock or equity. But with money, you want something where that's as uninteresting as possible. You want its value to be stable. You want holding it by itself not to generate any value. And you want it to be a good, medium of exchange and unit of account and that kind of thing. And these two things I don't think can be reconciled. I think they're fundamentally two different things you want. So it just makes sense that the money, the MEL, is different from the proof of stake token, which is the SIM. And the more technical reason is actually that kind of the way Melmint, which is the way MELs are printed, works. You do need a second token to kind of act as collateral for the MEL so that it can stay stable. I think an imprecise analogy would be DAI versus MKR, for example. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that Maker DAI was actually my introduction to that kind of concept before. It's very interesting. A couple of years ago. That's cool. We have.
Me too. Boost.
Nice. Who is that?
Yeah. Magnum Thunderstick, which is an excellent username. We just sent awesome chat. Thank you very much. And they need to run, unfortunately. So hopefully we see them back here again soon.
Come back and break things with us anytime.
Thanks everyone.
Always welcome. So I'll just point out that we're coming up on 12 p.m. my time. We're probably a little under an hour. I'm happy to stick around a while longer. How about all of you guys?
Yeah, I think a little bit longer would be fine.
I can nerd with the best of them. How are the pints coming down?
I actually need to run. I just figured out that for a flight, I actually need a COVID test, so I need to sort some things out. So,
safe travels.
Good luck.
All right, thanks everybody. It's been fun.
Happy holidays.
Bye.
I got it too, guys, but thanks. It was a good chat. Take care.
Indeed. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
See you here, Nathan.
Cheers. Okay, well, in that case, I've got a couple of questions here that I had prepared in advance. But a lot of it we've actually touched on already without really needing to ask, so it's been a very fluid conversation. Bear with me a moment. So I was listening back, Eric, to the podcast with Decor recently, and there was a lot of talk about immutable endogenous trust.
Yeah.
Which was, it's quite a heavy concept, and I think that might be something that'd be good for, well, it'd be good for me and for anybody else listening to really understand that, because that's quite a heavy concept, but I imagine it carries a lot of value.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think you're muted suddenly, Darren.
Me? Am I?
Oh, yeah, no,
I
now
shouldn't be.
now it's good.
It's okay?
Yeah, now it's good.
Oh,
okay,
You cut
cool,
off
cool.
for a while. Yeah, so is the question about basically what is endogenous trust?
Yeah, so, how could a layperson like myself understand that, basically?
I think the idea is really when you say that a blockchain or any kind of protocol has endogenous trust, what you just mean is that you trust that the protocol will behave correctly. For example, you trust that when you send your bitcoins to somebody, nobody else is going to steal it. For example, you trust that it's secure. But this trust doesn't depend on pre-existing trust on something else. That's really what endogenous trust is. Like, you trust that thing because of what that thing is and how it works internally, and not because you trust something else. So this is different. For example, let's compare this situation to, let's say you use a secure TLS connection to connect to your bank and then use your bank to transfer money. In that case, yes, TLS is a secure protocol, but you can only use it securely if you actually trust the other person on the other end of the connection, which is your bank. And so your trust in this whole technical system depends on external trust, pre-existing trust on the bank. So this is the key distinction, whether the trust comes from inside the system or outside the system. And I think that before blockchains, we didn't really have any kind of security system on the internet that had endogenous trust. All the cryptography and privacy systems and those things, they were more about, let's say you already trust the bank. Now, how can I use that trust as a root of trust to do other things? It's about transferring trust. It's not about generating trust. But blockchains can actually generate trust.
I can add on to that to think of a more tangible example, like in a way. Think about, we make a phone call, and this is over regular, good old-fashioned copper, no like digital this, that, and the other. And you go, well, that's exploitable. You cannot necessarily trust it because you can get a wiretap on that. And then you go, you picture like, this imaginary perfect world where you go like, okay, but say we have a direct line that has like laser beam alarms and messenger pigeons and so on and so forth. So like you can actually know for a fact by design that thing is not tappable.
Yeah, and you can know that that's secure by examining the thing itself. You don't have to trust somebody else, right?
Yeah, there's no like authority saying like, oh, don't worry, we got it. It's like, no, I don't trust you, and you sound sketchy even saying that.
Yeah, but
Yeah, exactly.
even if you use the super secure phone line to, let's say, talk to your bank to transfer money, then you still need exogenous trust in the other person on the other end of the phone line. So yeah, and the thing about blockchains is really like it lets you build kind of abstractions that have endogenous trust. Like you can build really complicated applications that have endogenous trust and do really cool things like, I don't know, NFTs or CryptoKitties and stuff like that still have endogenous trust. And that's just really cool. And that's something that only blockchains can do.
Yeah, and to add on to the whole like, well, what about the internet and this, that, and the other? Like, if you look at it, and I get on this soapbox a bit, but when you look at the internet, why so much of it is insecure to begin with is because it was mostly just a bunch of hackery kind of guys trying to get wires to touch. And you go like, how do we send messages through these things? And you go like, I don't know, wire it up, see if it works. There was no concept of like, is this secure? Because there was no concept of an outside world using the internet at that time, which is why when you look at things like DNS, you're like, it's unsecure. Like, what do you mean it's unsecure? It's like completely in the open unsecure. And that's just like, it shows the cobblestoney kind of design of the internet, and then taking this on the other end of going like, no, I know for a fact I can't trust any of you people. So let's go from there.
Yeah.
Cool. I suppose, yeah, internet security wasn't really an issue until we had the internet for a while.
No, DARPA projects, you were like, look, you and John have it. Well, what are we worried about?
Yeah. That's cool. Something on that as well, and kind of two questions rolled into one. But we talked about earlier about things like wrapping Mel and putting it onto Ethereum, for instance. So, and also we talked about, you know, other types of projects like inherent, like having endogenous trust, like even things like NFTs and stuff like that. So to switch that around, are there other projects and kind of ideas and products already existing on Ethereum that you would like openly welcome to come over to Themelio if they wanted to wrap them and send them the other way? And is there any particular
Well,
ones that
I
you
mean,
like?
yeah, so first of all, like wrapping here just really refers to transferring assets. You can't, you know, move CryptoKitties onto Familio in a trivial fashion. I would say out of all the applications on Ethereum that I think would really fit Familio, I think just all the token projects, because I think stateful smart contracts are a terrible way of representing tokens. Like ERC20 is just weird. It's like you have this global contract with a bunch of slots, and that represents a token, and that's like unnecessarily bug prone. For example, like you've had tokens in the past that had basic vulnerabilities with like math when you add tokens together and things like that, and that's simply because tokens are not a first class concept in Ethereum. They're something you construct through arbitrary smart contracts. And because of this, also, like whenever you deal with ERC20 tokens, you always run into complications. Like, you know, what if the ERC20 token contract does something weird internally? Like, what if the balance is randomly changed? There's nothing that says you can't do that because it's all just stateful smart contracts. I think, while on Familio, custom tokens are treated as first-class citizens. You can make your own token denomination, just like the Mel and the Sim, and pass it around, and they obey exactly the same rules as the Mel and the Sim. And so making tokens, and very highly secure tokens that you're sure are secure, is very trivial on Familio. And I think that's something that really suits Familio's UTXO-based model too, versus Ethereum's state-based model.
Okay, that's cool. So, yeah, because so my introduction to cryptocurrency was I became interested in Ethereum, and then, you know, I knew Bitcoin was a thing before that, but I didn't know anything about Bitcoin. So I was much more familiar with ERC20 tokens before I was familiar with something like UTXO and, you know, this kind of standard. So from what you were just saying there, does that mean that, so say you have another token on Themelio, would it be like it would work at the same standard as Mel and Sim, basically?
Yes, because so the thing is really like in Themelio, every single coin, like every single UTXO, just comes with a tag that says what currency this is. It could be Mel, it could be Sim, it could be whatever you put there, basically. So it's a completely first-class concept, and therefore we don't need kind of like to hack tokens in through contracts like we do on Ethereum.
Gotcha. Interesting. That's cool. Okay, so I see somebody else has joined the call recently, mysteriously named S. You're very welcome to join.
Silent, but hopefully somebody can yell at us a little bit more.
S for silent. Well,
there
very
we
welcome. Yeah, so I suppose I don't really have much more in the way of questions. One thing I would like to ask is there anything that each of you would like to address to current and future Themelio community members at this early stage? That I think could be fun.
Well, I would say if I had to say one thing is, don't think of Familio as your usual blockchain project. Don't try to fit it into your usual blockchain boxes, but think of ways you can use Familio in ways that you can't use other blockchains. So that's basically what I would suggest, because when I tell people about Familio, they kind of just think, oh, it's another blockchain project, and blockchain projects come with all these stereotypes and baggage, and but the whole point of Themelio is to kind of start over with blockchains. And
You basically just described how I describe Rust to programmers wanting to take on Rust. And like, how about if I try to do it like this thing? And like, let all that go.
yeah, so basically, Familio completely rethinks blockchains. So perhaps you should also rethink about how you can use Themelio and contribute to Themelio. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I missed most of that, but I think you were all able to hear each other, so it should have come through okay on the recording.
Yeah, I think Darren's internet gremlins are at play.
The
I
connection's
don't think
good.
you received your shipment.
I sent some more trucks of internet. We need to get some more lorries to ship out more internet. If you guys are not familiar with the internet is a series of tubes joke, which is not really a joke, you need to go watch that video because it's hilarious. Here's tubes.
The internet is not a truck.
No,
It's a series
it's
of-
on many trucks. And sometimes they get clogged up. Oh no.
Let me find it. I'll
But
find
it's
it.
not still clogged, or
Well, the trucks try to get into the tubes all at once, and then it's like the worst board game ever.
Here. I found it.
And there we go.
Yeah.
I do have something that I've been wondering. How did you come up with the concept of pegging value to a DOS? Because after coming up with the idea, it seems like so obvious, but like, how did I feel like I would never in a million years arrive at have that idea. So like, what was your inspiration?
Hold on one moment. We're talking code words. So, who wants to explain what DOSC
Yeah,
abbreviates?
I can explain. Basically, the
you
idea
go.
is that the mel is pegged to a day of sequential computation. So the idea is that 10 years ago, one mel is worth the price of renting a computer and back then and running it down for a day. And right now, a mel is worth getting a computer right now and running it down for a day. So the computer actually changes. Like, it's always the up-to-date computer. So the cool thing about this DOSC, like this day of sequential computation, is that it's a value that actually stays pretty much stable throughout time, but you can measure it trustlessly on a blockchain. And the question was, how did I come up with it? I think it really came up because I was trying to think of something that I could peg a stablecoin to, that I can measure trustlessly without oracles. And for example, one thing would be literally number of hashes, right? Just the sheer amount of computation. But that's not going to work because that would change over time. And that would become cheaper and cheaper over time as computers improve. And that would mean your currency inflates like crazy. And then I thought, okay, maybe it's sheer amount of sequential computation. Because sequential computation doesn't improve as quickly because of physical reasons. But that still gives you like a 20% inflation rate. That's still not good. So then I thought, okay, so why can't I use the sheer amount of sequential computation? Because computers get faster. So let's just adjust for that. Let's just say the time of sequential computation instead of the sheer amount of sequential computation, and that's also trustlessly measurable, and that's kind of how I got here. Yeah.
I love hearing like the step-by-step process of getting there.
Yeah. So is that?
Any other nerdy queries? Anyone want to badger us? Come on. We're here for your entertainment.
I think we might have one more.
Good deal.
Now that my connection is back. Sorry about that. So Eric, you've got some unique takes on the whole governance within protocols idea. And as Themelio is 100% governance free after mainnet is fully live, why do you think governance isn't truly necessary for most blockchain protocols?
Well, I actually wouldn't say that. I think governance is actually pretty necessary for blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum. as a necessary evil, right? Because without governance, they're going to become obsolete, and they have problems that need to be solved through governance, etc. And so I think it is necessary for Bitcoin and Ethereum, and that's part of the problem, right? So what I'm saying is that governance is bad, because if you have governance, you can't have perfect endogenous trust, because you got to trust whatever mechanism does that governance. And if that thing has endogenous trust, then you have to trust that, and eventually get to something that doesn't have endogenous trust. And so your whole thing doesn't have endogenous trust, and that's really bad. So governance is bad, and so therefore Familio has to be really carefully designed in such a way that we don't need governance. It's not that I just make a blockchain and declare we're not going to do governance, because we might need to do it. So that's the idea. And I think, how do you make something a protocol that doesn't need governance? I think it really is you find the right abstraction. That's just doesn't need to change, because you can design around it rather than design things into it. And I think the internet protocol is a great example. It never needed governance. After it was invented, everybody just used it, they implemented it themselves, and it spread across the globe. But nobody sits down every year to say, okay, now Facebook wants to make a social network. How do we support social networks in IP? We don't need to do this kind of governance process.
That's it. You send stuff.
Yeah, because it's such a general abstraction that we don't need to change it at all. And because everybody uses it, even if you want to change it, let's say you want to upgrade it to IPv6, nobody's going to come, because they're happy already. So Themelio is designed in a similar fashion. It's designed to not need governance, and it's also designed so that if it becomes popular, governance is impossible. You can't herd all these people together and get them to agree to anything. Yeah.
And I have a nerdy, obviously this is pretty nerdy to begin with, but a different flavor of nerdy take on it. And for fellow operating system nerds and whatnot, this will make sense. But if you look at the Linux kernel, and it's 5 million lines of code or something ridiculous at this point. And anytime there's anything that needs to be done, it's all shoehorned into that. And you go isn't this kind of a monster that we always need to attend to, and it's always growing, and it's this, that, and the other? And yeah, but that's the design of a monolithic kernel. It's this humongous monster that's always devouring. And then you look at the idea of a microkernel design, and you go, it just does this stuff, and then you guys handle everything else. And I kind of look at that, Eric's design like that, where it's it does kind of like the Unix methodology of it does one thing and it does it well. And I'm not trying to build a spacecraft. If you want to do that, you get to do it. But this is just a car. It just does the thing. I'm not adding on a spoiler and this and everything else. You handle that.
And I think that analogy is quite apt. And you can see kind of this effect on governance, where what patches get into the Linux kernel becomes this huge politics game, because everything has to get...
there is so little trustworthiness about any of that stuff. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so because all the changes have to be made in this centralized fashion in this huge system. And so if you have the right abstraction, then governance kind of melts away. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a really good.
As ever, keep the base of it simple.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm on board with that. Okay, let's have a look and see if there's anything. We've nothing else in the general channel.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed this. Don't know if my brain is going to intake too much more of this high-level information, but I'd love to.
We can just leave it with the internet as a series of tubes. I think that's a solid ending point.
Yeah.
Oh goodness.
Can we just append that video to this video on YouTube?
Look, I'll tell you this much. If you want, I'll put on a full-blown suit, and I'll be the face of Familio, and we can just, the internet is a series of tubes, use blockchains, and we can just leave it at that. I feel like that's where we need to go with this, and if nothing else, it would make people intrigued.
I love it. Please do that.
Endogenous tubes.
Endogenous trustless tubes on a truck. Come on down to my TED Talk.
Honestly, this idea, I'm disappointed in the serotonin people for not coming up with it. Stress me out.
I think we need to hunt that guy down and get him to be the.
I'm
and
worried.
not
Yeah.
marketing.
Worried Mead is
I didn't hear
doing my
anything.
job. No.
Look, I can get the raw footage up pretty soon. I'm just saying, like I've got studio equipment. We can do this. Like, what colors are we thinking? It needs to be something warm but welcoming and still strong, though. You know, I feel like that's what it needs to go.
Green.
Do we want just like stitched into it, like cross stitch style, just like tubes, just like across the chest?
No, you're becoming too cartoony. I'm afraid this is gonna happen.
No, this needs to be serious. Like, think Wilford Brimley with the like, "Hi, I'm Wilford Brimley. Get your blood sugar check it often." Like that guy, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a rough day.
Anyway.
Let's do it, please. How many Hail Marys do I need to say to get this done?
Maybe just post a question in the general channel to say like, who would like to see me being our spokesman with series of tubes, blockchain for the win.
That's like a governance proposal to me.
Like it's like the movie The Net, where they have like a little like parentheses at the bottom right corner, and you click that, and you're like, where am I going in the internet? What is this alternate world? Oh my goodness, who's this man?
Is that senator? Is he still with us or no? Ted Stevens.
I don't think so, but you know, I'm not in the business of keeping track of senile men. Like, Grandpa's gonna get up and tell me about internet. Come on.
Oh man. Well, I know I was a fly on the wall for much of this, but I just wanted to say this was a great free-flowing discussion, and I learned a lot just from passively listening.
Yeah, I
Glad
really
to be of
enjoyed it too.
entertainment.
Thanks for listening, man. You're a real one.
Yeah.
We'll have to make this a regular event, I think.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
I'm good with that.
The first time it's gone pretty well, I think, but we'll continue working on it. We'll
Yeah,
get this
I'll
done.
edit the video
Yeah.
and
If-
post it.
Sweet.
Okay.
Okay, guys.
All wrapped
Thank
up?
you all very much.
Yeah.
Much appreciated.
Cheers all.
Bye.
All right.